小便渐渐发，大便瞬间生。天启篇之三。The small changes gradually occur, while the big changes happen in an instant. Xiefeng. Translation edited by Jiejing. The setting sun cast a magnificent crimson hue over the plateau. Amidst the rolling yellow dust, shepherds herded their flocks back home, and wisps of cooking smoke rose from the rooftops in the village. The sound of human voices, barking dogs, and bleating sheep created a picturesque scene of early spring pastoral return. Suddenly, the earth trembled. Like a giant bomb exploding, a dense yellow column of smoke billowed up from the tranquil summit of Mount Sale. The livestock scattered in panic, while people, unable to escape in time, struggled to comprehend the disaster unfolding before them. The towering Mount Sale abruptly shrank in size. Then, the ground beneath their feet began to shift, causing the unsteady individuals to stumble and fall. In an instant, walls collapsed, houses crumbled, and village after village was reduced to rubble. Halfway up the mountainside, a rolling wave of mud suddenly surged forth, roaring as it rushed down towards the valley. People screamed and cried out, desperately trying to escape. However, in the rapid downhill slide, traveling at nearly 20 meters per second, they couldn't outrun the pursuit of the Grim Reaper. Over 400 head of livestock and 237 men, women, and children from 3 villages were tragically buried alive. The massive landslide on Mount Sale lasted only a few short minutes, and as the dust settled, the desolate wilderness returned to its dreadfully serene state. This is not a myth or a futuristic science fiction story. It is a factual account of the catastrophic landslide on Mount Sale in Dongxiang Autonomous County, Gansu Province, as described by Mr. Zheng Yi in his urgent report on China's ecological collapse. Was it a natural disaster or a man-made calamity? My home is not far from Mount Sale, so the news of the devastating landslide quickly reached my temporary hometown. To my knowledge, the general consensus among people was that it was a natural disaster. But was it truly a natural disaster? There is a profoundly heartbreaking true story that may help answer this question. My hometown was once a picturesque place, but later, the government decided to construct the Lujiaxia Reservoir. This massive machinery of the state forcibly relocated us to a place full of gullies and ravines, where we had to rebuild our homes. At that time, several villagers from our village were irrigating a field. My distant uncle, while irrigating, had his young son playing nearby. Within just 2 hours of irrigation, suddenly, the ground beneath where the little boy was standing gave way. By the time my uncle realized it, his son had vanished without a trace. He helplessly watched as a young life was mercilessly swallowed by the earth. My uncle and aunt cried for 3 days and 3 nights. Why did the sky, Mount Sale, collapse? Why did the ground sink? The sinking of the ground was due to irrigation. So, why did Mount Sale collapse? Is it because the water accumulated by the Lujiaxia Reservoir seeped into Mount Sale? Furthermore, the Mount Sale region has traditionally relied on nature's bounty for sustenance. Since the agricultural reforms and the remarkable transformation of barren mountains into fertile fields depicted in The Great Achievement of Dazai and the film Red Flag Canal, people have exhibited heroic determination by constructing irrigation channels on the mountainside. The Mount Sale region has also built terraced fields, redirecting water from the plains to the plateau. Perhaps the fragile Mount Sale couldn't withstand the relentless human intervention, surrendering and bowing down to the heroic individuals who fought against both heaven and earth. Otherwise, why would such a tall mountain collapse? The collapse and landslide of Mount Sale were monumental changes, and significant transformations occur in an instant. This is what we call a big change that happens in an instant. The Tangshan earthquake in 1976, the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center in the United States, the atomic bomb explosion in Hiroshima, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster in the former Soviet Union, train derailments, plane crashes, car accidents, cerebral hemorrhages, heart attacks, and so on. These major changes all erupt suddenly when people least expect them. In my article, Perplexities and Insights of Life, I wrote, "Is worrying about the future of humanity groundless? Do you believe that the Titanic wouldn't have hit an iceberg? The sun and the moon are always in the river, flowing towards the vast ocean. But can they not suddenly turn into a sea of fire? Noah was mocked for building an ark on top of a mountain. People cheered when Apollo landed on the moon. There's a reason behind every event. Don't laugh without justification. Wise people are anxiously working day and night." In my article, Life is a Journey, I wrote, "Life is a journey, and at its end, there awaits a celestial gate. When Noah's Ark wasn't yet sealed, the world outside was still in a frenzy. But once the Ark's doors were closed, countless beings vanished without a trace. As the massive Titanic sailed through the ocean, the people on board were filled with joy. But when the colossal iceberg quietly approached, the clutches of death took hold of their lives. Whether you believe it or not, big changes happen in an instant. Why do big changes happen in an instant? It's because of the gradual occurrence of small changes. Who has witnessed the growth process of plants? Can you see it by staring? As people age day by day, who can see the specific changes? The sun rises and sets. Can you see it clearly? Someone undergoes a medical examination and is diagnosed with a heart condition. When did it start? Do they know? Small changes gradually occur, leading to big changes happening in an instant. Do you have any further questions? 万物皆有声，天启篇之5. Everything has a sound. Xiefeng. As long as there is movement, vibrations will occur. With vibrations, waves are produced, and with waves, sound is generated. All moving machines make sounds. All living animals produce sounds. All growing plants have sounds. Plants grow with sound, white clouds drifting across the blue sky have sound, butterflies gracefully dancing among flowers have sound, mosquitoes buzzing as they suck blood have sound, and the movement of the intestines has sound. Flowing water has sound, and even seemingly still mountains, rocks, and the earth itself have sound. This is because they are not only moving with the Earth's rotation and its revolution around the sun, but also because the molecules within them are in motion. Any frequency of oscillation produces sound. The crashing waves of the sea have sound, animals running and walking on the earth have sound, birds flying in the sky have sound, and signals emitted by television stations, radio stations, communication towers, including the signals from our mobile phones, have sound. All light has sound, not only the radiant waves of the sun, but also the faint glow emitted by a lit candle has sound. The flowing underground springs have sound, blood flowing through our veins has sound, and the upward flow of nutrients within the branches of ancient trees that have lived for 100 years also has sound. The brain has brain waves, the heart has an electrocardiogram, and our mental activities, thinking consciousness have sound. The universe has sound, empty space has sound, positive objects have sound, and negative objects have sound. The greatest creator who created everything in the universe has sound. 难破难解的36道八卦阵，天启篇之一. The 36 8 trigrams formation which are hard to conquer. Xiefeng. Translation edited by Jiejing. It was the summer of 1983 when I was working on the Chilean mountains at an altitude of nearly 4,000 meters. One morning, as I emerged from my tent, I suddenly noticed that the surrounding mountains and fields had donned a green attire overnight. How could the previously desolate earth, which was yellowish just yesterday, transform into a vibrant green overnight? Bending down, I carefully observed and discovered that the grass, which seemed to have been sleeping with its head covered yesterday, appeared to have responded to the call of some divine force. Within a few hours, all of them broke through their constraints and grew more than 5 millimeters upwards. What amazed me even more was that a few days later, the wildflowers bloomed all over the mountains and fields. What astonished me further was that after a few more days, those flowers bore fruit. What left me in awe was that, within a few days, those fruits had already ripened. What startled me the most was that, after a few more days, the lush green mountains and fields reverted back to a desolate yellow. Everything seemed like a dream. Why did the grass on the plains require half a year to go through the entire process of growth and decline, while the grass in the high-altitude region completed the entire cycle of growth and decay in less than a month, perfectly and swiftly? Is this a kind of sorrow or a kind of happiness? Is it a hymn or a lament? I don't know. It must have been around 1986. At that time, Hainan had not yet become a province. After visiting Tianya Haijiao and Sanya, I returned to Haikao. One day, I had a bowl of stir-fried noodles in a small restaurant. As I licked my lips and stepped out of the restaurant, I noticed an old man selling a book under a tree near the entrance. I wondered if it could be a book on Taoist practices. Curiosity prompted me to take a quick glance, and I saw the title, The Art of Becoming Invisible, Taoist Magic, written on the cover of that ancient-looking book in a pale yellow color. I had never heard of such a strange book title before. I flipped through a few pages, filled with terms like heavenly stems, earthly branches, and 5 elements, but I couldn't understand a single sentence. People who love books have a peculiar habit. The more incomprehensible a book is, the more they enjoy collecting it, at least for the sake of appearances. This book was indeed quite expensive, but I still bought it. Back at my workplace, I occasionally flipped through The Art of Becoming Invisible, Taoist Magic, but I couldn't understand it. During a visit to my hometown, my younger brother mentioned an unfortunate incident that occurred in a particular family in our village. He said that the calamity that befell them was said to have occurred on a highly ominous day, coinciding with a joyous event they had organized. He proceeded to inform me of the specific day on which they held the celebration. Puzzled. Upon opening The Art of Becoming Invisible, Taoist Magic once again, I discovered that the date my brother had mentioned was indeed recorded in the book, highlighting it as a highly ominous day. It turns out that the knowledge of selecting auspicious dates in Chinese cultural treasures is not superstition after all. The Art of Becoming Invisible, Taoist Magic, is fascinating. I delved deep into the world of The Art of Becoming Invisible, Taoist Magic. To my surprise, I realized that it was an extraordinary and unparalleled book. It turns out that the wisdom of Jiangxia, Zhangliang, and Zhuge Liang all stemmed from The Art of Becoming Invisible, Taoist Magic. Ancient Chinese sages were truly remarkable. My grandmother once told me a story. She narrated, in the distant past, there was a peculiar individual who constructed a door using stones in a flat area. There were no walls, and both the front and back of the door opened up to vast fields, completely unobstructed and visible at a glance. People could walk around the door to reach its front or go to its back. However, this eccentric person informed everyone that this door was a celestial gate, and once someone entered, they could never come out again. The crowd burst into laughter, commenting that this peculiar person must be crazy or mentally ill. There was a young man who, in a carefree manner, wanted to prove that the peculiar person was indeed crazy. He walked towards the door, and as soon as he stepped over the threshold, he was stunned by the sight before his eyes. He beheld ancient towering trees, verdant rolling hills, distant peaks shrouded in mist, graceful cranes soaring in the sky, waterfalls cascading down cliffs, and the gentle sound of flowing water. It was a magnificent and enchanting scene, like a splendid paradise. The young man forgot his original intention and continued walking along the forest path. After a few turns in the mountains, he came across a house nestled at the foot of a hill, with wisps of smoke rising from the chimney, emanating an atmosphere of tranquility and elegance. As he approached the door, intending to knock, to his surprise, a beautiful woman dressed in colorful attire, resembling a budding peony, appeared before him. With a graceful nod, she beckoned him and said, "I have been waiting for you for many days. Please come inside quickly." As he stepped into the hall, he saw a middle-aged woman with a kind expression, neat attire, seated gracefully in a high-backed chair. She beckoned him, saying, "Come, come. You have a destined bond with our young lady spanning several lifetimes. Today is an auspicious day, and I shall arrange your marriage." The story continues with a joyous wedding night, filled with candlelight and bliss. They went on to have children, and it is said that they had a total of 5 sons and 5 daughters. The whole family lived happily together, and this young man lived until the age of 99 before peacefully passing away as an immortal. As for the onlookers outside the stone door, they witnessed the young man entering the door, but he suddenly vanished without a trace. They searched frantically, running here and there, but they couldn't find him. In the end, they demanded that the peculiar person remove the magic and return the young man to them. The peculiar person said, "Be patient. Be patient. Wait for another 6 hours, and you will see him." After less than an hour, the eagerly awaiting crowd saw the young man, who was still unconscious. Just as they were about to inquire about what had happened to the peculiar person, they realized that both the peculiar person and the stone door had disappeared without a trace. It was then that the people realized they had encountered an immortal. My grandmother continued to speak to me, saying, "Silly boy, if you contemplate the mysteries of the heavens and earth, profound truths may one day become clear to you. Do you want to become that young man?" I replied, "Grandmother, you're talking about mythology. We are now studying science, and mythological stories are made up by people. How can I become that young man?" Grandmother responded with, "I don't understand science. Let everything be determined by fate." Later, when I read The Story of the Magic Mirror, the scenes of the White Flower Fairy descending to the mortal world and the children of Luo Binwang and Su Jingya breaking the Yu Water Formation, Fireless Formation, Ba Knife Formation, and Kai Bei Formation, I couldn't help but recall my grandmother's stories and reflect on the process of growth and decay I had personally witnessed in the grass on the Chilean mountains. It was then that I realized the boundless mysteries that exist in the universe. I have just realized that the magic of the art of becoming invisible, Taoist magic, lies in its ability to create and break formations. I have just realized that the greatest creator has laid out 36 8-diagram arrays in the universe. I have just realized that we humans exist within one of the greatest creator's formations. Who can decipher the greatest creator's formation? Who can unravel the secrets like Xie Sun did with the dragon-slaying saber? It all depends on our destiny. 联想思维天启篇之75 Associative Thinking Xiefeng Translation edited by Jiejing. Being able to grasp a particular phenomenon in the natural world, and then through that phenomenon, draw analogies, make inferences, and establish connections with other related factors is called associative thinking. The most typical example of associative thinking is Newton, Apple, universal gravitation. Newton, observing the common natural phenomenon of an apple falling to the ground, associated it with gravity. From gravity, he made connections to factors such as mass, velocity, and spatial distance, and subsequently derive the three laws of motion. This is an example of associative thinking. The phenomenon of swirling water in a bathtub drain can be associated with the direction of Earth's magnetic field lines. The spiraling ascent of a bean vine can be associated with the direction of celestial bodies' movement. The natural phenomenon of wood floating and iron sinking on the water surface can be associated with buoyancy and the shipbuilding industry. The discontinuity observed in certain events can be associated with quantum mechanics. The concepts of motion, mass, and gravity can be associated with the curvature of space-time. The role of consciousness can be associated with the holographic nature of the universe, and so on. All of these examples fall under the category of associative thinking. A qualified detective can deduce the character traits, motives, and whereabouts of the parties involved from the smallest clues. A qualified forensic expert can infer the physical characteristics, facial expressions, and even the appearance and attire of the perpetrator from the victim's injuries and facial expressions. A qualified traditional Chinese medicine practitioner can identify internal organ disorders based on a patient's complexion. A qualified fortune teller, based on a person's facial features, can make predictions about their past actions, future fortunes, and misfortunes. A qualified feng shui master can assess the quality of a person's living environment based on their handwriting and habitual movements. A qualified politician can anticipate a dynasty's transition and the arrival of a new era based on common psychological and behavioral patterns among people. A qualified economist can predict stock market fluctuations, the future economic development of a company or a nation based on specific events. A qualified sociologist can associate the prevalence of prostitution, drug use, and organized crime with the loss of a nation's belief systems and moral values. Even a fashion designer can envision future clothing trends based on popular colors and the pace of people's footsteps on the streets. Associative thinking possesses qualities of originality, inventiveness, novelty, and uniqueness. It is a divergent thinking process. Many people may appear to have associative thinking, but in reality, they are merely applying the associative knowledge of others or drawing from long-standing experiential summaries. For example, many farmers can relate the changing seasons to spring plowing, summer growth, autumn harvest, and winter storage. However, this is not the result of their own associative thinking but a reflection of their accumulated experiences in their conscious minds. Similarly, many individuals can associate joint pain with changes in weather, which is the effect of knowledge and experience rather than the result of associative thinking. Many businessmen make decisions on what goods to import or export based on regional differences, timing variations, and seasonal variations. Again, this is a result of experience, with few exceptions. When we look at the professions of engineers, technicians, experts, scholars, ordinary detectives, doctors, economists, and others, it may seem like their work relies on associative thinking. However, in reality, they are simply applying the knowledge or experience acquired from education or accumulated through their work. For instance, Newton's association of an apple falling to the ground with the concept of universal gravitation is a result of associative thinking. But if a college student claims to associate an apple falling to the ground with universal gravitation, they are merely stating the knowledge they have learned, recounting Newton's discovery, rather than expressing their own associative thinking unless they have never heard of Newton or were unaware of the concept of gravity. Strictly speaking, associative thinking refers to the type of thinking that leads to new discoveries, inventions, creations, and theories. In this sense, individuals who possess associative thinking are primarily scientists, inventors, forensic experts, traditional Chinese medicine practitioners, fortune tellers, feng shui masters, exceptional politicians, military strategists, and engineers or technicians who can develop new products to some extent. The individuals who primarily drive the slow progression of human civilization are those who possess the ability of associative thinking. Without them, the civilized society we have today would not exist. Materialistic thinking is rigid thinking, while associative thinking is divergent thinking. It breaks free from the rigidity of materialistic thinking and surpasses the imitation and copying of image thinking. It directly extends its tentacles into unknown territories, leading to new discoveries and inventions and finding new pathways. However, associative thinking still falls far short of truly grasping the profound mysteries of the universe. I can see this point from the thinking of great scientists such as Newton, Einstein, Planck, Hawking, and others. I also see it in the efforts of scientists attempting to establish a unified field theory of the universe. For the entire human race, I hope to see a significant emergence of individuals with associative thinking abilities. This is because when it comes to transporting a 6-ton cargo from point A to point B, which is 800 kilometers away, an individual with associative thinking can simply drive a heavy truck and complete the task in a day. On the other hand, if we rely on individuals with material thinking, even if each person can carry 50 kilograms and walk 100 kilometers a day, it will still require 120 people and 8 days to accomplish the task. This approach would be wasteful, laborious, and inefficient. As for individuals with image thinking, they simply cannot achieve this task. From an artistic perspective, image thinking may be greater than material thinking. However, from a practical standpoint, when one is hungry, a steamed bun can provide sustenance, whereas a picture of a bun, no matter how realistic, cannot solve practical problems. For Life Genuine members, I hope that everyone does not limit their thinking to associative thinking because associative thinking is still a lower-level form of thinking. It's like the situation where information needs to be exchanged between the two shores of the Atlantic Ocean. Materialistic thinkers would build ships and send people across, imagery-based thinkers would lay undersea cables, and associative thinkers would use radio waves. However, our approach is 静处无灾殃 闹处有祸患以天启偏之期. Quiet places are free from misfortune, but places of excitement may breed disaster. Xiefeng. Translation edited by Jiejing. My kitchen at home is 20 square meters. Occasionally, I would see a few light red ants here and there, on the floor, by the sink, on the countertop, or hurriedly searching for food on the cupboard. Since their numbers were small, my partner and I never paid them much attention, allowing them to roam freely and do as they pleased. Later on, we noticed that their numbers kept increasing. Sometimes, we would see more than 10 of them scurrying around, so we had no choice but to take appropriate measures to remove them. One day, I suddenly discovered that they were gathering in large groups, marching back and forth through a gap beneath the kitchen cabinets and sink. Curiously, I opened one of the cabinets and to my surprise, there were nearly 1,000 ants crawling inside a box of rock sugar, which a friend had brought from my home country a few days ago. This was unacceptable, so I fetched a can of insecticide called Super Kill EM and sprayed it along their trail, covering their entry and exit points with a substantial amount of the spray. In less than 10 minutes, the ant colony was completely wiped out. After that, I didn't see a single ant for the next 2 weeks. This incident illustrates that nothing should not be allowed to develop excessively, nor should it reside in a place that is not its own territory. Otherwise, there will be a catastrophic outcome. It also highlights the fact that one should not rush into things or join the crowd without careful consideration, as there may be hidden dangers in chaotic situations. Think about the rabbits and cacti that once proliferated uncontrollably in Australia, the kudzu vines that spread extensively in a certain state in the United States, the overpopulation of elephants in Zimbabwe, and the sparrows that covered the mountains in China during the 1950s. All of them encountered disasters as a result. Let's take a look at China's trade with Russia in the 1980s. Initially, it was smooth and unimpeded, then it prospered and flourished, but eventually it faded away. The main reason behind this was that things got too lively. The Great Leap Forward was very lively, the race to surpass the UK and the US was very lively, the Cultural Revolution was very lively, the nationwide practice of Qigong was very lively, the sit-in demonstrations at Tiananmen Square were very lively, venturing into business after the market reform was very lively, engaging in corruption and abuse of power was very lively, online commenting was very lively. There is a connection between two extremes, and when something reaches its extreme, there will be a backlash. Following trends and seeking excitement inevitably lead to disappointing outcomes. When university students choose their majors without considering the future rise and fall of professions 4 or 5 years later, blindly pursuing popular fields of study, they will face disappointment upon graduation. Similarly, if farmers only see the high value of peaches this year and everyone rushes to plant peach trees, when the planted peach trees bear fruit 3 years later, it will be a period of devaluation for peaches. Observing the prevalent trend in China today where many people exhaustively strive to strike it rich through primitive accumulation, alongside government officials eagerly leveraging their positions to amass wealth, it appears to be considered normal, a case of to gain without working. However, when this fervor reaches its peak, it signals the commencement of tragedy in many people's lives. In chaotic situations, there are hidden dangers, and wise individuals should avoid them. 贵者不清闲，天启篇之六. The noble rarely appear. Xiefeng. Translation edited by Jiejing. There were 3 strange encounters that made me realize the noble do not easily reveal themselves. The first one was in March 1994, in the Kiorokio area of Matabiland North Province in Zimbabwe. It was a quiet day, and I was driving my pickup truck along an abandoned path, venturing deeper into the jungle. As I reached a small hill, I turned off the engine and was about to get out when I suddenly saw a white deer on the hill. It turned its head and looked at me for just a few seconds before swiftly disappearing into the forest. I quickly got out of the car and chased after it, looking left and right, but I couldn't catch a glimpse of it again. I had asked the local villagers if there were any white deer in the area, and they replied, "Never seen one." I also asked many colleagues if they had ever seen a white deer, and they responded, "Nonsense. There are no white deer." The second time was in August 1995, but the specific location is now a fuzzy memory. We were drilling a well by a lush riverbank. It was a cold day when suddenly 3 cranes descended from the sky. Their bodies were gray, with long necks that turned white at the head, topped with red crowns. Their claws were also red. There were 2 larger cranes and 1 smaller crane. They landed about 30 meters away from us. I had seen this type of crane before in 1964 when I was herding sheep near the Yellow River. According to the elders, it is rare to encounter these cranes, and those who do are believed to have good luck and are likely to prosper financially. I have now seen 5 of them but still haven't struck it rich. At that time, there were 2 Zimbabwean people who witnessed these 3 cranes with me. I asked them, "Do you often see this type of crane?" They replied, "This is actually the first time we've seen this kind of crane." The third time was on a day in February 2003. The location was my residence at 46 Pendennis Road, Mount Pleasant, Harare. It was around 6 o'clock in the morning. Having lived in Harare for nearly 8 years, I often observed birds in the early morning. I visited 2 bird parks and had seen dozens of bird species. However, what excited me was that particular morning when I encountered a peculiar bird. It was slightly larger than a sparrow, with a green head, black body, and a red tail. What stood out the most was its tail, which was vividly red and measured approximately 25 centimeters in length. It perched among the treetops for only about 10 seconds before flying away. The white deer, cranes, and exotic bird. What do they signify? They signify that the noble do not easily reveal themselves. This leads me to think of the Emperor of Japan, who seldom appears in public because of their nobility. Diamonds are hard to find because they are precious. Reclusive hermits in the mountains do not easily emerge because of their nobility. Some households keep their extraordinary treasures hidden from the market because of their value. This leads me to the realization that anything that is esteemed, rare, and of infinite value is not easily found. This leads me to ponder, how many rare and precious things are yet undiscovered in this universe, in this world? How many wise and enlightened sages and immortals are hidden, like dragons and tigers lying in wait? Truly, the mysteries are boundless. Wise ministers choose their lord, while virtuous birds select their tree for perching. Tigers do not descend upon plains, and horses do not venture deep into mountains. The phoenix does not land in a place devoid of treasures, and immortals do not associate with ordinary people. Blinded by a single leaf, one cannot see Mount Tai, and without destiny, it is difficult for a person to encounter extraordinary experiences. Indeed, the noble do not easily reveal themselves, and those who readily display themselves are not truly noble. 我奶奶到底是谁？我又是谁？天启篇之二. Who is my grandmother after all? And who am I? Xiefeng. Translation edited by Jiejing. If one contemplates the heavens and earth incessantly, profound principles will eventually become clear. Let's leave it to fate. These are two phrases that my grandmother often said when telling fairy tales. Contemplate the heavens and earth? How does one contemplate? Profound principles? What are these profound principles? Fate? What does fate mean? This ignorant and foolish grandson, why didn't I ask my grandmother about these questions in the first place? It wasn't until more than 20 years after her departure that I remembered to inquire about these matters. I have asked the sun, moon, stars, inquired about the mountains and rivers, questioned the gods, Buddhas, and immortals, and even inquired about the winds, clouds, rain, and snow. The answer I received was mystery. I have no choice but to trace back to my grandmother and suddenly realize that this grandmother of mine is extraordinary. Grandma was illiterate, yet she knew countless fairy tales and could speak eloquently, presenting one set of principles after another. This left my highly educated uncle and other learned individuals with no opportunity to interject, but instead compelled them to listen attentively. Grandma's cleanliness and tidiness were renowned. Her cleanliness was not only reflected in her immaculate attire and perfectly arranged hair, but also in the spotless and bright tables, chairs, and benches, as well as the orderly interior decor. It was further evident in the often overlooked dark corners that most people easily neglect, such as under the table and cabinet, in the corners of the walls, behind the door and under the food steamer, and inside the bucket next to the stove, where cleanliness surpassed even the external appearance. In my memory, Grandma never went to burn incense or worship Buddha, yet she strictly abstained from meat. Not only did she refrain from eating beef, mutton, chicken, duck, or fish, but she also never even tasted eggs, involving any of these. One summer during the harvest season, while Grandma was cutting wheat, a wheat awn got stuck in her throat. As my uncle and father recounted, Grandma immediately threw down the sickle, stood up, and said, "Whether you continue harvesting this wheat is your business. I will never engage in farming again." The next day, she rented a storefront in the county town and opened a Zhang family steamed bread shop. Within a year, this Zhang family steamed bread shop became renowned far and wide. When my father was young, during an argument with Grandma, he wanted to show her a little lesson. He took a pig-killing knife and a rope, stabbed his own ankle bone and tendons, then looped the rope through and hung himself upside down on a forked tree branch in the courtyard. If such a scene had occurred with an ordinary mother, she would have been terrified, at the very least shouting and screaming. However, my grandmother, witnessing her son's foolish act, calmly and disdainfully pointed at her own neck and said, "Son, stabbing your ankle is nothing remarkable. If you want to stab, stab here next time." After saying this, she completely disregarded her own son hanging upside down on the tree as if nothing had happened and walked away. My father, watching Grandma's receding figure, was completely conquered. Instead of giving Grandma a little lesson, she ended up giving him a little lesson. My mother held great respect for Grandma and often exclaimed to me, "If your grandmother were a man, she would pierce a hole through the sky." It is vulgar and intolerable to simply describe the extraordinary and unconventional actions of my grandmother. How could she, an illiterate peasant woman, possess knowledge of so many fairy tales? Why would a person who does not burn incense or worship Buddha abstain from meat? In the ever-changing weather of the scorching summer, when the golden ripe wheat must be urgently harvested, why would my grandmother, just because of a minor incident of a wheat on getting stuck in her throat, angrily abandon farming without hesitation? When her own son pierced himself and hung upside down from a tree, why didn't the mother feel any distress and simply walked away as if nothing had happened? It's a mystery. I remember my grandmother telling me, I was in the 5th grade at the time, "Let me tell you about the origins of our family. Take some time to write it down." But being ignorant and playful, I didn't take it to heart and casually replied, "Grandma, let's talk about it later." Little did I know, shortly after, my grandmother passed away. Opportunities once missed may never come again. One misstep became an eternal regret. I lost my roots. As a lost individual without roots, I'm like a drifting duckweed, aimlessly floating on the vast sea, carried by the currents without a sense of direction. I don't know where I came from or where I'm heading. While reading the Bible, it suddenly dawned on me that everything my grandmother did was for my sake. Before Jesus came to earth, heaven sent John as a precursor to prepare the way for him. Before I came to this world, the kingdom of heaven sent my grandmother to enlighten and guide me, who was about to be born. So, who is my grandmother after all? And who am I? Countless sleepless nights of realizations and the wonders of nature have led me to contemplate the profound principles and discover my own roots. I have come to understand why the greatest creator has laid down the 36 8-diagram arrays in the universe and have unraveled the mysteries of deciphering these 8-diagram arrays. Oh, the greatest creator. Your love for me is immeasurable, and even if I had billions of years, it would be difficult to repay. 伊甸园是这样失落的，天启篇之时. The Garden of Eden is lost like this. Xiefeng. Translation edited by Jiejing. I have 2 German shepherds, belonging to the military dog breed. One of them is named Luanbei, and the other is called Lambua. Whenever the night is deep and quiet, I enjoy taking a leisurely stroll on the lawn in my courtyard, which is even bigger than a soccer field, and ponder in tranquility. During this time, the 2 dogs joyfully run around me, both guarding the courtyard and providing me solace. Due to their loyalty, I treat them well. They receive meat every day, and their monthly food expenses are at least 200 yuan. I bathe them once every 2 weeks, and I never scold or beat them. There exists a harmonious and mutually beneficial relationship between humans and animals. 3 months ago, my animal-loving wife brought home a small pet from a friend. Its scientific name is West Highland White Terrier, belonging to the small hunting dog breed. These dogs have a small size but are highly alert and intelligent. They are capable of both being affectionate and understanding human emotions. Due to their likable and adorable nature, they often live indoors with humans and enjoy all the luxuries and comforts of a dog's life. The next day, my partner bought a large circular plastic basket specifically for it, lined with a thick layer of old window screen folded into a mattress inside. The little dog lies on it, and the level of comfort is no less than me lying on a memory foam bed. To address the issue of the pet's waste, my partner deliberately found a large box made of hard cardboard with only a 3-inch high edge. Inside, she laid a layer of clean sand as the dog's bathroom. Everything was prepared, and only enjoyment remained. Unfortunately, this little dog doesn't use its bathroom and insists on urinating and defecating on the carpet. My partner searched for information, sought advice from experts, and repeatedly tried to train and guide the dog, but it remained stubborn and unchanged. Helplessly, we had no choice but to let it spend the night outdoors with Luanbei and Lambua. The treatment it should have enjoyed has been lost. Who should we blame? Do we as humans also experience the same kind of sadness as our dog? There was a tall and strong African man named Paul. He, along with his spouse and 2 underage children, lived in a less than 10 square meter room made of old wooden boards, in a very pitiful condition. When I spoke with him, I discovered that he was psychologically and mentally stable. Moved by sympathy and compassion, I invited their entire family to live with me. I assigned Paul to manage the garden and clean the courtyard, so that he could earn a wage through meaningful labor, enough to provide a relatively normal life for his whole family. A month passed, yet the weeds in the courtyard remained unattended, and the flowers continued to wilt. When I was at home, I often saw Paul squatting to weed, but as soon as I left, I discovered he had gone back to sleep. I assumed Paul didn't enjoy this task, so I brought him to the store to handle cleaning and organize merchandise. However, after a week, the dust accumulated, and the store appeared even more disorderly. What is the reason? Upon observing, I noticed Paul spent a considerable amount of time cleaning rags. He'd stand by the sink, dedicating an hour to washing a single rag. Feeling helpless, I assigned him as a security guard at the club, providing him with a brand new security uniform that suited his tall stature. He looked remarkably enthusiastic, unable to wipe the smile from his face. I assumed this would finally please him. I briefed him on his duties, specifically instructing him on handling disruptive individuals and theft incidents. However, much to my surprise, he still didn't put much effort into his work. He would stand at the entrance like a statue. When a thief took the camera, he lacked the courage to even ask a question. Feeling utterly helpless, I had no choice but to ask Paul and his family to leave, allowing them to fend for themselves outside. Such examples have occurred more than 20 times in my vicinity alone. How was Eden lost? It wasn't because God was unjust or the deities lacked compassion. It was because we as humans are unworthy of living in Eden. We do not deserve it. I had a colleague who, a few years ago, begged me to send him an invitation letter to help him do business abroad. Despite the difficulty of the situation, I actively assisted him in handling various procedures. When everything was ready and only the departure for overseas remained, he became arrogant and boastful. In a dark corner with his group of friends, he started devising an evil plan. First, they belittled me, saying, he, a nameless and insignificant pawn in the company, can survive overseas only because of the government's support. If he can survive abroad, aren't we all better than him? They then developed a detailed plan on how to initially rely on my assistance to establish themselves overseas, and subsequently, how to kick me aside and surpass me. Upon hearing this news, I immediately sent him a fax message. There has been a change in circumstances, and I am unable to accommodate you temporarily. Let's discuss this in the future. How was Eden lost? The expulsion of Adam and Eve from Eden had special reasons, but one factor was their own actions, disobeying the rules and taking the forbidden fruit. When individuals face misfortune, the majority of people's initial reaction is to seek various reasons to absolve themselves. They can always find sufficient reasons to blame the heavens, the earth, society, and others, but they rarely look within themselves for the causes. When humanity as a whole faces misfortune, many people begin to blame the greatest creator, gods, and Buddhas, unwilling to look for reasons within human moral behavior. Alternatively, they may pray to the greatest creator, gods, and Buddhas, seeking salvation for humanity, yet they are reluctant to reflect on their own actions and make necessary changes for self-improvement. The old Eden has been lost, and the new Eden has long been established, with its gates open to everyone. My disobedient little dog would certainly not be able to enter Eden. Paul, being lazy and irresponsible, an unproductive individual, cannot be allowed into Eden. Despite my colleagues' active pursuit, their intentions are impure, and I cannot permit them to enter the sacred Eden. The blind cannot see the blue sky, so they claim there is no sky. The deaf cannot hear sounds, so they say rivers have no ripples. Those without spiritual awareness cannot see God, so they say there is no Eden. God loves the humble, and Buddha enlightens those with affinity. As for the rest, they are like Paul, destined to fend for themselves. 从青霉素过敏到舍利子形成，天启篇之八。From penicillin allergy to the formation of Sriracha. Xiefeng. Translation edited by Jiejing. In 1999, I drove a Nissan car with my lover and child from Harare to visit Victoria Falls, which was over 800 kilometers away. During that trip, what amazed me was not just the grandeur of the waterfall, but a young European girl, not even 20 years old, who was bungee jumping. Between Zimbabwe and Zambia, there is an iron bridge over the Zambezi River. The bridge is approximately 1 kilometer above the river surface. Standing on the bridge and looking down, the river water surged and huge rocks protruded, making one feel dizzy and amazed. On that bridge, people often came to play bungee jumping. It involved tying a specially designed rope around the waist and feet, and then jumping from the bridge. This jump wasn't from a 3-meter-high wall to the ground. It was a leap beyond the limits of death. Not to mention those who have acrophobia, heart disease, or nervous disorders. 90% of people in general wouldn't dare to try it. Some men could be seen playing bungee jumping, which seemed acceptable, but seeing a delicate and beautiful young girl doing it left people dumbfounded and speechless, unable to break a sweat. Even some men still had pale faces after finishing their jumps. However, when this girl was pulled up to the bridge, someone asked her how she felt, and she excitedly exclaimed, "Wonderful." Oh my. While others were almost scared out of their wits, she found it wonderful without changing her expression or heartbeat. Is she even human? It suddenly dawned on me that this girl's mental and emotional makeup was different from others. What ordinary knowledge considers strange phenomena held no strangeness for her. She treats it as simple, ordinary, and normal. It turns out that people are fundamentally different from one another. Despite all being human, the differences between individuals are immense. Some people are allergic to penicillin, while many others are not. Some people are allergic to pollen, while others are not. Some people are allergic to metals other than gold and silver, while others are not. When reading Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio by Pu Songling and Ji Xiaolan's Notes from the Orchid Pavilion, we discover that some people turn pale at the mention of ghosts, while others, upon encountering a ghost, treat it as casually as they would treat a cat, showing no signs of fear or disturbance. Perhaps some would argue that Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio and Notes from the Orchid Pavilion are metaphorical stories and should not be taken literally. I believe there is some truth to that. However, in broad daylight, when someone puts on a ghost-like mask, some children tremble in fear while others not only show no fear but even burst into laughter. This is a fact. I remember in 1989, after the students in our school watched the movie Painted Skin at a theater in Zhangjiakou City, Hebei Province, some of them were afraid to stay alone in the dormitory that night, and they didn't dare to go to the bathroom alone. Yet, many others were completely unfazed. I still remember when I was in middle school, Dongxiang County No. 3 Middle School in Gansu Province. One day, a classmate carried a 1-meter-long snake and stood on the podium, shaking it to intentionally scare the female students. The girls laughed and giggled, but a tall male student sitting in the back row screamed and turned pale. The image of fear from that student is deeply etched in my mind. It has been 30 years, but the memory remains vivid, as if it were yesterday. What's there to be afraid of a dead snake? Yet, my classmate reacted as if he had seen a ghost. Freud or parapsychologists might be able to explain it, but regardless of the explanation, it is a fact that this classmate's psychological makeup is unique compared to ordinary people. On the eve of a life-and-death battle between enemies, some people sleep soundly, snoring loudly, while others toss and turn, unable to fall asleep. Beethoven could compose the Heroic Symphony, so why can't we? Da Vinci could paint the Mona Lisa, so why can't we? Newton could discover universal gravitation from a falling apple, so why can't we? Einstein could find the equation for mass energy equivalence, so why can't we? Because people are fundamentally different. This means that using our own understanding to judge the thoughts and actions of others often leads to incorrect conclusions. In the future world described in the Bible, everyone is free from illness. In the Buddhist scriptures, the Pure Land is described as a realm where everyone lives eternally. In the Life-Genuine description of the 10,000-year world, people can fly. Do we believe in these descriptions or not? After the death of Buddha Shakyamuni, his remains were cremated, and numerous crystal-clear, colorful, and steel-like solid sarira were discovered among his ashes. In December 1990, after the passing of the Singaporean Chinese monk Master Hong Chuan, 480 colored crystal-like sarira were found in his ashes. In 1994, during the cremation of Master Yuan Zhao's body at the Fahua Temple on Mount Guanyin in Shaanxi, his heart remained intact and transformed into a dark brown, hard relic. For the past 10 years, I have been almost free from illness. On rare occasions when I feel discomfort, taking a painkiller quickly relieves it. Why is that? It's not because I have naturally good health, but rather because of my cultivation practice. I have developed a simple and effective method, and the results have been remarkable. When practicing, I am oblivious to extreme cold or hot weather. My mind becomes empty during the practice, and afterwards, my mind is exceptionally clear. The Viagra that can excite human nature, as well as opioids, heroin, and other pain-relieving drugs that can evoke intense emotions and a sense of transcendence, may have no effect on some people. Perhaps you have not heard of this before. In the recent days, in the article, The True Face of Chinese History in 5,000 Years of Up and Down, published on the website Chinese Soul, the author Xin Yuan stated, "The perfect return of the Yellow Emperor indicates that human beings can return to the heavens through cultivation. The only channel of communication between humans and gods is cultivation." The Bible, the Quran, the Diamond Sutra, and the Tao Te Ching all contain basic knowledge. However, many people are allergic to this basic knowledge. Regardless of the content of these scriptures, as soon as they hear the word scripture, they become allergic. Furthermore, some people randomly interpret the scriptures, making the originally profound and spiritually scientific wisdom appear mysterious and unfathomable, causing people to feel intimidated. When the seasonal flu virus arrives, many people may catch a cold, but when SARS strikes, some people will never get SARS. In 1348, the Black Death, a widespread outbreak of bubonic plague, claimed the lives of 1/3 of Europe's population. But why didn't the remaining 2/3 die? When periodic cosmic waves arrive, many people die. Whether you flee to the ends of the earth, dive underwater, or burrow underground, you cannot escape the impact of these waves on your nerves and psychological structure. Only those who have cultivated and practiced to an advanced level, whose nerves and psychological structure resonate with these waves, not only do they not feel the arrival of cosmic waves, but they are also unaffected by their negative effects. If you receive the cowpox vaccination, you won't get smallpox. If you enter Life-Genuine, you won't fear periodic cosmic waves. In the next 3 years or so, perhaps several extraordinary phenomena will occur, and by then, people will understand the true meaning of the birth of Life-Genuine. Are you allergic to penicillin? What are you not allergic to? Do you have sarira in your body? When will you have sarira? People, what are you really living for? Where are you rushing to in your busy lives? What have you truly understood? 意识能听到上帝的声音，天启篇之4. Consciousness can hear the voice of the greatest creator. Xiefeng. Translation edited by Jiejing. In the vast universe, there are billions and trillions of voices, each expressing their own thoughts. As long as we use spiritual perception, consciousness, to listen, we can hear them. Common sense tells us that hearing relies on ears, and without ears, we cannot hear any sound or better understand the intentions of others. However, I advise we discard common sense and explore whether we can hear without ears. Let's start with an example. Helen Keller, an American blind writer, hailed by the Encyclopedia Britannica as one of the most accomplished representatives of disabled individuals in history. She embodied blindness, deafness, and muteness in one person. Despite being deaf, she could hear the voices of others, not through her ears but through touch. She would place her index finger on the speaker's lips, her middle finger on their nose, and her thumb on their throat, enabling her to hear their voice clearly. By placing her hand on a violin, she could hear the melodies played on it. This fact demonstrates that we can understand the voices of others even without using our ears. We can hear through the sense of touch. People with arthritis, as long as they pay attention, can be the first to hear the sound of climate change. When the river water warms up, ducks are the first to know, and sunlit flowers and trees meet spring early. The sounds of spring are first heard by certain animals and plants. Listening can be categorized into three levels. Using ears to listen is the primary level, using senses to listen is the second level, and using spiritual perception, consciousness, to listen is the highest level. What ears hear are the appearances of things. What senses hear are the processes of things. What consciousness hears are the essences of things. If someone says, "I love you," and you hear it with your ears, you perceive a sweet and pleasant sound, which is the superficial aspect. However, if you can feel the sound of love, then love has taken on a process. And if you can hear the sound of love with your consciousness, that love becomes a selfless and enchanting love. The love heard with ears is fleeting, the love sensed is enduring, and the love heard with consciousness is eternal. The supreme love is silent. To generalize further, the sounds heard with ears are often illusory. The sounds sensed are a mixture of reality and illusion, difficult to discern truth from falsehood, while the sounds heard with consciousness are genuine. The loudest sound is silence. The sound of silence can only be heard through consciousness. When a strong wind blows across the wilderness, we can hear the sound of the wind with our ears. When a gentle breeze passes through the wilderness, we can perceive the sound of the wind through our senses. However, there are countless sounds of the wind that we cannot hear with our ears or perceive with our senses. We need to use spiritual perception, consciousness, to listen. On a hot day, if you can quiet your mind and listen with consciousness to the sound of the Arctic's icy landscapes, you will immediately feel cool. On a cold night, if you can hear the sound of the flowing lava from a volcanic eruption, you will not feel cold. In this statement, there's a fundamental difference between what's imagined and what's actually perceived with consciousness. For instance, during hunger, envisioning eating lavish dishes doesn't solve the hunger issue. Yet, when consciousness is used to simulate eating, the sensation of hunger isn't felt. This pertains to a matter of different levels. If one exercises consciously, like Helen Keller did, they will discover many natural mysteries. On a calm, windless night, you raise your palm and feel in all directions. You will notice a cool breeze coming from certain directions and a warm gust from others. Over time, your palm will be able to discern the sound of any object, whether it's directed towards mountains, rivers, trees, flowers, houses, cars, people, or tables. You can hear their sounds. For example, when you hold your palm against a thin book rolled up in your hand, you can sense its essence. Some books emit warmth, others coolness, while some books have no discernible temperature. If you can't feel anything, the reason lies not in the material itself, but in the lack of conscious training within yourself. It's like an ordinary piece of iron that lacks magnetization. It has no magnetism and therefore lacks north and south poles to distinguish between them. If we plug our ears and place our fingertips on someone's lips, we won't hear the person speaking, but Helen Keller could. The reason is that we haven't undergone conscious training. The creator of the universe created human beings, but did not grant us extraordinary hearing. Instead, our range of hearing is limited to 20 to 20,000 hertz. We are unable to hear sounds outside of this range. If we were able to hear infrasound and ultrasound, our days will have no peace. The sound of our heartbeat would be louder than drums. The sound of brushing our teeth would be like the earth shaking, and the sound of drinking water would resemble the roaring of the Victoria Falls. How could we bear such intensity? Everything has a sound. Any movement generates sound. When a jet plane takes off, it creates a deafening noise. However, if the frequency of its sound during takeoff exceeds 20,000 hertz, it becomes silent. In reality, it is not truly silent, but rather beyond our range of hearing. There are certain sounds we cannot hear because we are ordinary individuals, and only a few exceptional people can hear them because they are extraordinary beings. There are certain sounds we cannot hear because we are listening with our ears, while some individuals can hear them because they are listening with their consciousness. The thoughts and activities of the human mind have sound. The processes of conscious thinking have sound. These sounds accurately and unmistakably reveal the inner world of every individual to the vast world. Consequently, the greatest creator also accurately and unmistakably knows the nobility and baseness of our inner world. In Chinese history, many extraordinary individuals emerged who possessed knowledge of numerous mysteries of the universe. They warned us, even whispered words are heard by heaven like thunder, hidden intentions are seen by divine eyes like lightning. Keep your heart pure and your thoughts clear. Desire no guilt in the open. Offend not in the unseen. In all matters, advise against concealing the truth, for within 3 feet above your head, there are divine beings, and so on. They explicitly conveyed to us that any activity within our inner world generates a sound that may be inaudible to humans, but is distinctly heard by the greatest creator and gods and Buddhas, resonating like thunderous lightning. Jesus, Shakyamuni, Laozi, and others have left us with wisdom rather than the mysteries of the universe. Jesus explicitly stated that pearls should not be thrown to pigs, and that he spoke in parables so that those with wicked hearts would not understand. Shakyamuni also primarily spoke for those on the path of the Mahayana. Laozi similarly understood that if the petty-minded individuals were to grasp the mysteries of the universe, it would bring endless harm. Life Genuine has made the greatest efforts and has led everyone to the edge of the mysteries of the universe. Looking at human history, the current state of human hearts is worse than before. In truth, humans no longer qualify to continue existing on this beautiful blue planet. However, gods and Buddhas are unwilling to give up and still want to make one last effort, even though the chances of realizing this desire are only 1 in 10,000. Everything within our inner being is heard without omission by the greatest creator. Similarly, the greatest creator selflessly communicates his intentions to each and every one of us. The reason we cannot hear the voice of the greatest creator lies in the fact that our spiritual perception, consciousness, has become deaf. We have been misled by appearances. Our consciousness is too chaotic and restless, and we lack concentration and focus. Shakyamuni sat under the Bodhi tree for 7 days and nights, fully concentrated, before hearing the voice of the greatest creator and attaining enlightenment to become a Buddha. Any individual who can hear the voice of the greatest creator will undoubtedly achieve Buddhahood. The souls can resonate with one another, and extraordinary consciousness can hear the voice of the greatest creator. May all beings become Buddhas. 知识与智慧，天启篇之九 Knowledge and wisdom. 雪峰 Xiefeng. Translation edited by Jiejing. In the movie Fearless, Hua Yuanjia is a master of martial arts. His shadowless fist allows him to overcome enemies, catch them off guard, and make them defenseless. It is an unstoppable technique that leaves opponents unable to defend themselves and provides them no room for counterattacks. The power of the shadowless fist lies in its lack of a fixed pattern. It is highly versatile, constantly changing, and adaptable to any situation. It may seem complex with only one move, yet it contains endless variations and techniques. The shadowless fist is a technique without a technique. If you were to ask Hua Yuanjia, Master Hua, how many patterns does your shadowless fist have, and how can one learn it? Hua Yuanjia would not be able to give you a definitive answer because even he himself is uncertain. The secret of the shadowless fist lies in its embodiment of the essence of martial arts. Regardless of the specific martial art, philosophy, thoughts, or methods, once it becomes one with the Tao, it becomes unfathomable, only to be comprehended through personal insight, impossible to express in words. Confucius once questioned Laozi about the Tao and later said to his disciples, "Birds, I know they can fly. Fish, I know they can swim. Beasts, I know they can run. Running beasts can be caught in a net, swimming fish can be caught with a mesh, and flying birds can be shot down with an arrow. As for the dragon, I simply don't know. It rides the winds and ascends directly to the ninth heaven. Today, having met Laozi, isn't he just like a dragon?" Confucius, a sage renowned for his profound knowledge and wisdom, when faced with the wisdom of Laozi, lacked the ability to fully comprehend it. He could not perceive the limits of Laozi's wisdom because Laozi's wisdom, much like Hua Yuanjia's shadowless fist, is something that is without action yet accomplishes everything. It is elusive, just like not seeing its head when approaching, nor its tail when following. It is like a tiger trying to swallow the sky, with nowhere to find an opening. The Buddha, Shakyamuni, spent over 40 years teaching the Dharma, yet in the end, he stated that he had not truly said anything, nor had he given any teachings. He said to Subhuti, "Subhuti, do not say that the Tathagata thinks, I must expound the Dharma. Do not have such a thought. Why? Because if someone says so, he will truly slander the Buddha and be unable to understand my teachings. Subhuti, when the Tathagata expounds the Dharma, there is truly no Dharma to teach. Yet, this is expediently termed as teaching the Dharma." He went on, circling around, reversing and repeating, but ultimately, he informed us that he had not said anything at all. Wonderful, because Buddha Shakyamuni attained enlightenment. When I was contemplating how to explain the origin of the universe, unsure of how to effectively articulate it, one evening, as I was reading the Diamond Sutra, I burst into laughter.